I'm Corinne Sweet, and up until this June, I've been the chair of the Books Committee. Also established the Book Award for the first best novel, and which is now going into its 5th year, which I'm really pleased, and I'm very delighted that I've been allowed to stay on the Books Committee. I'm looking forward to working with people on that. I think this whole question of self-publishing came up because of conversations with John and conversations that arose on the Books Committee about the sort of inquiries we were getting. And I am a person who's published with many different publishing companies, you know, as an author. And I've also now republished 4 of my own books using a self-publisher. So though I've had those two experiences. I've also been a journalist for a very, very long time and worked for many publications. So I've got many experiences of print. And I have to say at the outset, I don't think I'm in any way an expert in this field, but having written this guide with John, I think I've learned how much I don't know.
Brilliant. Thank you, Corinne. And Orna, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Orna Ross. I too am an author and was published the old way because that was the only way to do it until 2011 when I self-published my first book, and best move of my writing life, without a doubt. And it led to me co-founding with my business partner and husband, the Alliance of Independent Authors, which has now grown to have thousands of members all over the world, because we talk about the wonderful thing about self-publishing is that it isn't just about print books, it's about ebooks and audiobooks as well, which become kind of core formats for self-publishers. So yes, I have spent 10 years finding out what I don't know and trying to find out better solutions. And we, we do education and advocacy for what we call indie authors. So the core of our membership are people who are successfully self-publishing, taking their self-publishing very seriously. We have members who have 6- and 7-figure publishing businesses and publishing their own work, which is an incredible achievement. And our main message, I think, is that the difference between being a self-publisher and publishing with a third-party publisher is, with a third-party publisher, you have a career. You're looking at gatekeepers and establishment and influencers who can take you to your readers, whereas as a self-publisher, you're running a business. And that's a very different proposition. And that can be the hardest thing for authors to get their minds around when they're starting out. So I'm delighted to be here today, and thank you very much for inviting me. Delighted that the Guild has produced this guide, and it's a really, really succinct and introduction to what is, as Corinne said, a very complex subject.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, all of you. So I'm just going to ask a couple of questions. We can get going. So I guess the first thing I'd really like to know is, because you've all published both the old way, sometimes with traditional, sometimes with third party. You've all published that way. You've all published as self-publishers as well. Really, what I'd like to know is, what to you are the key differences between both of those models? You know, what are the main positives of both? What are the main drawbacks of both? Well, how do you find both of those processes when going through them? If I go to, I've got to stay with you, Orna, if that's all right.
Okay.
You'd like to answer first?
Yeah, so I suppose I jumped in there with one of them, that whole idea that self-publishing is a business. But I think the main difference is freedom and control. So, I get in trouble for saying this, but the traditional and corporate publishing industry is based on author failure. Most people fail to get a publishing contract, but most of those who do get a publishing contract fail to get marketing budget behind them. And, there are a lot of returns. So what you get is a very small proportion of people who, within the traditional publishing industry actually getting their books to market. With self-publishing, it's the opposite. Anyone can take their book to market. And so there are pros and cons for both of those. The main thing with self-publishing in terms of the pros is, as I said, creative freedom and creative control. And that means that you can do things your way. And it's just a fantastic, if you can work out who your reader is, which is a core part of the job. And if you understand what we call the 7 processes of publishing, you understand that no matter who's publishing a book, the book must go through these 7 processes, which are editorial, design, production, distribution, marketing, promotion, and rights licensing. And in order to get a good book to the reader and to reach its desired reader, you have to take a book through those 7 processes, whether you're publishing somebody else, whether you're publishing yourself. And there are a lot of skills involved there, and a lot of different skills involved there. And so that is, I think, the main con, which comes at the beginning. The learning curve is very steep, and we always say self-publishing is a misnomer, that no good book, a good book is always a team effort. No good book was ever published just by one person. You know, you have to get a team together, and you can do that either by hiring a service to help you with that work, you know, sort of soup to nuts service, as the Americans say. That's somebody who'll take you through everything, or the way that we encourage our members to actually to use if they want to make a profit on their books and, you know, run a successful publishing enterprise, to hire individual services and to build a relationship with your editors, with your designers, with the people who help you to market, using virtual assistants to help you to reach your readers. So it's something that builds up over time. Self-publishing is not a quick fix, the opposite. It's something that takes time, but it does give you the ability to build an actual asset over time. You're not licensing your rights, you're holding your rights and still reaching your readers. So in time, you can come to sell your publishing rights and have discussions with third-party publishers, but from a position of power, which is very different to when you're starting out, when it's kind of publish me, please. You know, which puts you in a very unequal position in terms of negotiating a deal with third party.
Wonderful, going through all that. Corinne, could I ask you for your thoughts really on kind of the positives and negatives of self-publishing and traditional publishing, and kind of what to you the key differences and kind of, like I said,
yeah, I have to say, listening to Orna, I really wish I'd known Orna a very long time ago, and I'm drinking in absolutely everything that she's saying here because it's so clear. I think I'm going to come at this question from a different angle. I'm a psychotherapist as well as a writer, and I write a lot of self-helpy books, and I've been an agony aunt in the media, and you know, I'm somebody that's got a kind, I call myself a sort of hybrid suite, because I have a career which is quite multifaceted. And I think whether you're going to go the traditional route, if you can go the traditional third-party publishing route, using an agent, having an agent, not having an agent, you know, tackling the slush pile, you know, however you want to go, or the self-publishing route, you have to understand who you are as a writer, and you have to know whether you're going to be, as Orna's saying very clearly, a business person, somebody who's going to look at the fine detail, who's willing to do all those 7 things that you have to do and be organized enough. So this means you have to have executive skills, you have to have sustainability, and you have to actually believe in your product, in other words, what you're going to write. And whether your personality or whether your character is such, and this is more like me, where I want to write something and I want to give it to somebody else to do it for me. And I think, I don't know if that's lazy or if I don't like the small print, but I've had a lot of books published. My first book was published in '92, and I've written about 26 books, and I've had a lot of books published by lots of different publishers. So the experience, I feel, and as Orna said, when you're a first-time writer, it's like, oh, you're going to publish me, how exciting, you know. And you are very much in the hands of the publishing house and how they do things, and you're told what to do, and you have to work with an editor, or you suddenly they're doing pictures for your book and you have no idea who the person is that doing those pictures, or suddenly it's a color, or they say, would you like this cover? And you say yes, and then it's a different cover. You know, there's lots of things that pop up, or the title. And I think in my experience of writing books with editors, what I've discovered is that they usually make the book better than I wrote it in the first place. The cover and the design really sells it. And of course, there is a department of people who are selling your book for you and with you. However, that said, and I'll be candid here, unless you're J.K. Rowling, there's not much of a budget for promoting your book. And if you go and do talks, it might be 2 old ladies and a dog in the back row, you know, which is the usual thing, or they don't promote it at all. There's no such thing as a book launch to most publishers these days. And I think the glory days of the gentleman and gentlewoman publisher, you know, the Cambridge Potato Peel Pie Literary Society is past, because it's not where you have a wonderful discussion on a velvet sofa about your book and when would you like to produce your next book. You know, if your last book doesn't sell, you don't get another deal. That's it. Or if they don't like you, or if you're out of, you know, what I've noticed over the years of writing is that it's got harder and harder and harder to sell books through traditional third-party publishing. And yes, if you have a track record, that's okay, but you're always starting again. So the reason I published 4 books that had become remaindered or had run out of rights or whatever, I did have to get the rights, you know, I checked that the rights were reversed. And then I went through the laborious process of finding out how to do it. And I would say that I learned a lot through doing it, but it wasn't easy for me. And that's because of my personality. I think if I was somebody that liked, you know, hiring an editor or all that kind of stuff, I did all the editing myself. I did all the proofing myself. The bits I don't like is all the sort of contractual stuff and all that. Or, you know, there's certain bits I don't like. I like drawing covers, but I wouldn't want to have to do all the other stuff. But I certainly decided to do my books as printout books and ebooks, so that because when I see clients, they can buy a book. And I find that incredibly useful. I'm talking to them about something, they go home, they buy the book, or I do a talk and people buy the book. And it's a dribble for me of selling. Whereas with the books I've published that are successful, I get big royalty checks and they plop into my account and I don't have to breathe in or out. It just happens. And it might be what I've discovered in my life is the books that take a short time to write make me the most money, and the ones that I bleed to death over, I earn absolutely nothing. So no, as you know, as the Adventures in the Screen Trade said, nobody knows anything. But I think you have to know yourself, and you have to know whether you're going to be a wonderful business person, whether you're going to market your book, whether you're going to go through the process. And I have to say, you have to believe in your book. If you're going to self-publish it, you've got to really have a clear idea. I really want this book to come out. I'm going to really make it happen. And then you do have that freedom, control and power, but you are also a little voice in the wind, and you've got to work hard. And frankly, writers work hard, whether you do it the traditional way or the new way.
Wonderful. Thank you, Corinne. And Merle, can I just get your thoughts again on what kind of the main differences are for you, kind of as someone who's done both? You know, what?
I mean, just listening to Corinne and Orna is incredibly helpful to me. And as I said a little earlier, is that I've read the guide, and I wish the guide had been around when I did it. And one of the things, I mean, just to recap, my background, yes, I've written a self-published novel and a traditionally published novel, but my background is TV, and I've been a script editor and I did done quite a bit of that in the past. So my experience was, I mean, I've tried to write novels in the past, and I reached the point where there was a particular story I wanted to tell, and I couldn't get it away, essentially. And so I thought, okay, this book needs to, the story needs to be told. Now, I mean, if we are thinking about the ups and the downs of self-publishing, I was very struck by what Orna just said, and I was a member of Ally, and I found it incredibly helpful. Really, so I would urge everybody, if you're going to do it, join Ally, because they are very supportive and very, very helpful. But the thing that struck me at what you just said was this business about being a business person, and I'm struggle with that. And although I, did as the best that I could, it's hard enough writing the novel without all the business side of it. And if, so it's, I think that it's really, really useful to think that you've got to take that on board if you're going to do it. But having said that, if you self-publish, you will find, sorry, if you publish with a traditional publisher or an old publisher or whatever we're going to call them, you will find yourself having to do marketing, and they like you to have, be on social media and, do this, that, and the other. So, these two things do merge. And one of the things, I mean, I know that there are some screenwriters among you because I recognize some of the names, but what is astonishing is if you're a screenwriter or a scriptwriter, you write the script, you give it to the producer, director, whoever it is, and then that's the end of it, and then you get the money, which is like fantastic. If you are an author, you're part of the package. And that's quite a shock, to think, okay, well, I've got to, I've got to sell it as well. So those things are similar, whether you are a self-publisher or a traditional publisher. And the other thing that I found is that, again, it was the guide is great because it tells you how to find a good editor and a good, for me, it was a bit hit and miss. I had a great person doing the cover. She did a fantastic job. She understood exactly what I was trying to do. My copy editor was great. She was fine. But the creative editor was just like so uninterested and so unhelpful and expensive. So and those things are, maybe in traditional publishing, the same kind of thing is going to happen, but it's a bit soul destroying when you've really flogged your guts out to write this, draft, and you're not getting helpful feedback on it. So, listen, all writing is tough. Okay, let's not kid ourselves. It's if we've chosen to do this, it's tough. But I wonder whether one's any easier than the other, actually.
Wonderful, thank you for that, Mel. That's fantastic. I just want to pick up on something that Orna you said about kind of whether or not, if you are going to go down self-publishing route, and that difference between hiring in individuals to undertake certain elements of the work, or if you're going to kind of employ kind of one organisation or one company to do all of the work for you. Now, it's just to kind of highlight here to those in the room that earlier this year, the Writers Guild and Society of Authors produced a report called "Is It a Steal?" It looked at what we're calling the hybrid model of publishing, which is where a lot of organisations that call themselves publishers charge the writers, the authors, quite a large fee in order to get the work produced, but they also try to take some of the rights as well at the same time, particularly some of the secondary rights. We've produced a whole report on that. I'll pop the link in the chat in just a second. I would encourage you to go away and have a read of it, because we do want to stop some writers falling into some of these traps where they pay a lot of money, they never get a return on their investment. I think our research showed something like you pay on average between £2,000 and £3,000, and you'd get back £68. It was that stark difference. The losses were in the thousands. So we do need to make you aware of that and just kind of put that out there. But that aside, I mean, one thing that I think would be really useful for people to hear about as well is kind of where do people start if they've got something that they want to get self-published or they want to get published, where do they even begin to start? And I think it's like getting the ball rolling that a lot of people really struggle with. If I could go to Corinne first, what you know, you've spoken a lot about, you know, knowing who you are individually as a person. Yeah, I think this is a great question. Kind of, what are the 7 steps? You know, where do you start? What's that step 1 of those 7 steps? Corinne, what do you think?
So I think, are you talking about self-publishing or publishing?
Self-publishing, yeah, let's talk about
Self-publishing. Well, I mean, the first thing is to really think what's the genre of the book, what the market is. I mean, the first thing I do is I look at, I'm in the middle of putting together 3 new books at the moment. I get my assistant, or I have a good look around. We research what all the other books are in the market. Is there anything similar that's come out? Who am I writing this for? Why am I writing it? Is it really timely? Is it something I really want to write? And I've written a lot of commercial books and also sort of other things. And I'm also a screenwriter, by the way, but not very good one. But I think the first thing is, you know, what am I writing? Why am I writing it? Who's going to read it? Because I think I always think, you know, what will the title of this book be? Who's going to pick it up? Who's going to buy it? Why are they going to buy it? What is it I want to say? And then I think with self-publishing, I think I've only self-published books that I've already written. I haven't gone the other route of, oh, I've now written a book, it's not been published, I'm going to do it myself. And I think both Orna and Merle are better placed to talk about that than me.
Okay.
But I think I would very much, if I were going the route and I'd written something, I wrote a novel that was absolutely awful, but I did win a little prize with it, and I've never put it into print. I can't even bear to read the first page, actually, but I have thought recently, well, maybe I could revisit it. So if I were going to revisit that, I might get an editor. I might pay somebody, a proper editor, to have a good look at it, because I think we shouldn't be precious with our writing. I think that's where I take my hat off to screenwriters, who are much more collaborative than we solipsistic, you know, book writers who tend to hang by our toes in the attic somewhere. I think it's very good to get another pair of eyes, somebody you really trust, somebody whose work you admire, somebody who's willing to read your work, or hire an editor to do a pass over a book and say, actually, this is completely unreadable, you know, just throw it away or start again, or no, this is great, you should really keep going with it. So don't be afraid to get somebody to look at your work, work out what level of work has got to go into it, and then work out all those technical things that you may need to do. Do you want drawings in this book? Do you want diagrams? Is it going to be a book that needs an index? Does it need illustrations? But very importantly, what is your title? Very early on, the title is a sort of peg that the book hangs off. And I think a title is really crucial, to know what your title is, what it is you're writing, what the structure is, what the length is. And then meanwhile, I think this, Orna will know much more about this, but then work out how you're going to publish it. Are you going to get a company that publishes books, self-publishing company, to do it for you, or are you going to do all the steps yourself? And then that's something you've really got to get to grips with. That's whether you're going to be the business person or whether you're going to be somebody that hires somebody to do that for you. But then knowing what you've just said, John, you have to look out for the people that are going to say, oh, give me 15 grand and I might give you a couple of copies back, you know. So look out for the people who are going to rip you off. So you have to make decisions all the time based on who you are, and be very clear about what it is you're trying to achieve and how you want to do it, what your resources are, what your time resources are, what your attention span is even. But get good advice.
Wonderful, thank you, Corinne. That's really helpful. And Orna, if I could go to you next, can you maybe also go through kind of those seven processes as well for us? Where do you start? Where would you say is best to
Sure. So I think Corinne is absolutely right. You start at the end. You start at, your reader. That's if you are not just the writer, you're also the publisher. So if you're writing a novel, or you're going to write and publish a novel or a book of poetry, it can be quite different, because you've got your own self imperative, if you like. You've got your passion, you want to write something, you've got a story, as Meryl said, that needs to be told, and so you're going to tell it, and you're not thinking as much as if it's a different kind of book. It can be a novel, or nonfiction books are often written more for a particular market. So the market dictates to some degree what's likely to go into the book. So I'm going to pick up from the point where you've got a fully finished manuscript. Final draft is done. And yes, the first step then of the publishing process is, as Corinne said, editorial. You've got to get an editor. We recommend, first of all, you get some beta readers, get some general feedback. They might be people that you've built up over time. While you're writing, it's a good idea to have a bit of a blog or a social media presence, or some way in which you begin to establish yourself as somebody who is working in the field that you're working in, whichever genre it is, whichever niche it is. The more narrow you can go there, the better. A lot of authors start off thinking, I'll take a wide kind of berth and hit as many people as I can. And traditional publishing was all about that, the mainstream, the mainstream media, hitting the middle of the market, hit as many people as possible. And, somewhere in there is your target reader, and they'll find the book both through reading or a review or whatever. Digital self-publishing is the complete opposite of that. You go as small as possible and you build out from there. So you niche right down into as few people as possible, and then you build on that in concentric circles out from there. So yeah, begin to sort of have that engagement with your reader, and then editorial comes first. Then design, outer and inner, is the second step. So that's your cover. Your title will be part of that, your book blurb, and also the imagery that you're going to use, and finding a good, if you're not somebody who can do their own covers. And I would honestly say, if you don't do professional covers for somebody else, then don't do your own. Book design is a very specialist art, and you can get good ready-made covers, and there are cost-effective ways to do all of these things. So design is the second one. And with design, you're beginning to think about marketing, which is later on you will get into in a serious way. But, in order to design your book cover, you have to have a sense of your reader. You have to have a sense of where you fit in the market. You have to have a sense of what other covers look like in your genre and in your niche. So, you're beginning the marketing work there, and you can begin to think about all those things while you're doing the writing. And what people don't say often enough about self-publishing is that and I think one of the problems with self-publishing is that the book, doing one book, is the hardest of all. The learning curve is really, really tough at the beginning. Book 2 is easier, and book 3 is much easier. So, often people fall off after book 1 because they think, oh no, that was too hard, I don't want to do it again. But actually it gets easier and easier, and particularly as you begin to build up your readership and you begin to get feedback. So stage 3 is distribution, and that's how you're going to get your book out, and that will depend on, is production. How, what formats are you going to produce? Audiobook, ebook are easier. They're digital files, they're easier to distribute, they're cheaper to distribute. Print is more complex. Print on demand is the core print method used by most self-publishers, because most of us don't have time to be kind of packing and wrapping and doing live events and trying to physically distribute the book. So being able to do stuff online is really good, and it's wonderful to have these tools and to have these distributors that we didn't have before, like Amazon, Apple, Ingram Spark for print. These are wonderful services that didn't exist 15 years ago, that can take your work to readers. And then there are aggregators. Someone in the chat mentioned Draft Digital. They are fantastic in terms of taking your ebooks to lots of different outlets. And the great thing about all those services that I've mentioned is they only get paid when you get paid. So yes, you will have the upfront costs of paying the designer or the editor, but you're not giving over thousands in advance. And until your book starts to sell, these distributors don't take any money. So they are both, once you've produced your book, you put it out through these platforms. That's the fourth stage, the distribution stage. And then you're into marketing and promotion. And these are two different things. They're often conflated, but actually marketing is about positioning the book. It's your promise to the reader. It's the things we were talking about earlier, the awareness of your placement and positioning in the market. What kind of book is this? What kind of author are you? What's your author platform? How are you going to reach your reader? How are you going to let people know? It's your website, it's your social media presence. It's things that are kind of ongoing and sit there all the time. That's your marketing. Whereas promotion is a drive behind your book. It could be price-based promotion, or it could be a crowdfunder promotion, or there are so many ways you can promote your book. But yeah, marketing is kind of all the time. Promotion is time-based. And then the final stage is the rights licensing stage. So when you get into translations, the adaptation, TV, movie adaptation, that kind of stuff. So that's at the advanced level. That's number 7. That's the seventh process. So that's an absolute whiz through. But yeah, they are the 7 processes of publishing, and every book has to go through them.
Wonderful, thank you, Orna. That's brilliant. And Merle, can I just ask you, where do you start? What's kind of your number 1 step?
Well, it is genre, and it's more genre now than in the past. And listening to Orna, I'm one of the people who dropped off after the first one, and but I'm thinking, okay, maybe another one, a second one will be easier. But I mean, okay, so you have to write the book, and then you have to, well, one of the bits that I actually rather enjoyed was, because it was print on demand, was doing the layout. And I found that really actually rather interesting. And I think I did rather a good job. So that was fun. And, but it is, I mean, it actually follows the same, as you say, the same kind of process, whether it's you're self-publishing or whether it's traditionally publishing. And including these aspects of promotion. I mean, I did all the stuff where you had to lower the price, and then saw the numbers go up, etc., and made it free for a week, and then tweeted and did all that stuff. So it's it's exactly the same process. It's just like you as the publisher, you're doing everything. I mean, you're either buying in the help or you're actually doing it yourself. But it's a lot of jobs there. But one thing that strikes me when you're talking about getting editorial support, and this is from me as the screenwriter, I can see Alan, okay, Alan Denman, he's, hey, right, okay, another screenwriter, is the kind of notes you get, I got as a screenwriter, have always been much more specific than the notes I've got as a novelist. Script editors, will just be really, really clear about exactly what you're supposed to do. And I haven't, in either case, had that sort of editorial from when I've been writing prose. Although I have to say, in the book that I wrote, the first thing that was traditionally published, it was very interesting. My agent put it out to a editor who did give me good notes. And that was the first time I had fantastic professional notes about what I was supposed to do to fix it. But generally speaking, the caliber of the notes I've got from editorial professionals hasn't been great.
Yeah, that's it's sad to hear. We always say you should choose an editor like you choose a spouse. very, very carefully. It's a very, very important relationship for a self-publisher, and it can take, you know, going through a few people before you find the right one, you know. So maybe we need a Tinder app for writers and editors.
Well, I see a lot of people who are trying to find dates on on dating apps, and I think that's very apt. The one thing I would say, I think that when you work with a good editor, if you work in traditional third-party publishing, you get allocated an editor. So you're just, you know, there is no choice in the matter. And sometimes some editors I've worked with have been so fantastic. They really have, you know, you get encouragement, you get feedback, you get somebody saying, you know, come on, when's the next bit coming, which can be good and it could be bad. But I think something you need to know about yourself if you're self-publishing is that if you're in the driving seat and you have procrastination patterns and the dog ate your homework every night and you never got round to it, there isn't going to be somebody telling you to do it. And that's something you really need to know about yourself. Are you going to have enough self-discipline? Are you going to be driven enough? And are you going to manage without having a traditional editor breathing down your neck saying, next Friday or you'll be shot, you know, which is on the whole the delightful sort of encouragement that you can get. Or, you know, I've written quite a few books in 1 month, which have been commercial books where I've had to meet a deadline, and the journalist in me has done it, you know, and nearly died doing it. But if I was self-publishing, I could always find something else to be doing. And I think that's where you have to know yourself, really.
I think what replaces that in self-publishing is the community. So writers set accountability sort of goals and stuff for each other. There are even now these sprint apps where writers will come together to, you know, produce words, and you can see how many words the other writer is actually writing on the app, not the actual text, but just the number of words. And so it's greatly upping their word count. So, and I think, you know, lots of what's there in the industry is replaced by the community and the encouragement and the accountability, and also the tips and the tools and the techniques and the sharing of the information about how to be good. Because while we talk about it being a business, it is a creative business. So it isn't kind of business as usual, really, and everybody makes it up as they go along in a way, and each a self-publishing business is as unique as each book. You know, so you build it around yourself and your own passions and your own mission as an author. Then you, as you go on, you develop a passion and a mission as a publisher. So you've kind of got these two hats, and there are different kinds of publishers. You know, if you're craft driven, and you will market and promote in a certain way, and you will brief your team, your support and your assistants and everything will be briefed in a certain way, in a very different way than if you are, say, a volume publisher, which is about, you know, getting as many books out as often as possible, publishing early, publishing fast. You know, again, you build a very different type of business. Or the third kind of publishing entity is the reader engagement one, where you customize for your reader and you get a lot of feedback. Maybe you use crowdfunding and all of that, and community becomes very, very important. So again, you build something different, and knowing yourself both as writer and as publisher takes a little bit of kind of sorting out, but they can be hugely, you know, supportive of each other. And what you learn as a publisher feeds back into your next book, and over time, you build this very nice, creative, integrated, harmonious kind of way of working that isn't all about hard work. It's actually very satisfying creatively.
Well, thank you, Honor. So just got a quick one, and then I think we'll try and get some questions from our members. We're actually only got 15 minutes left, so I think time's absolutely flown by already. But if I could just quickly get one top tip from each of you, what is the thing you wish you'd known before you self-publish your first book? What's kind of your, it could even be like, what mistake did you make that you now know to avoid? What are your top tips? We'll keep with you, Orna. What would your number one be?
Mine would be productivity over perfection. I spent too long worrying about small things that in advance that I would have learned much better by just going through the process and getting on to the next book. So that would be the thing that I see holds writers back most. Get it up, get it out.
Brilliant. Okay, and Mel?
I would, I did the thing that, you know, Orna says I shouldn't have done, and that was I didn't marry the first editor, but I did commit to the first editor who said that they'd do it, and it was a very it was disappointing. So I would do what Orna says, you know, whatever she, you know, she knows, and I would have looked at a few of them and, you know, worked out who's the one who gets what I'm trying to achieve.
Brilliant. All right, thank you. And Corinne, quickly from you as well.
I would say don't ever underestimate how much work you've got to do, how much attention to detail you've got to muster, and get support, get help for the bits that you don't like. Don't think you've got to do it all yourself and you've got to know it all yourself. I know that there are things that I'm lousy at, and I will hire somebody to do that with me and for me, because then I can get further. I can feel more satisfied. I can get a job done. And the other thing I really did want to say, with either process, so either whether you're being published by a traditional author or whether you're doing it yourself, you've got to, if you want to sell your book and you want people to read it, you're going to have to start on the social media front, on the marketing front, on the promotion front, on the blogging front, on the, you know, you've got to think about yourself as being a tin of baked beans right from the beginning. And, you know, I think that's something which in the past we didn't think about. I know now that people really do think about right from the get-go. So you're a tin of baked beans and you want to be eaten.
Wonderful. Thank you. That's a nice visual to go along with. All right, so I've got a couple of questions in the chat. If anyone else has got any questions, please do feel free to put them in. We might not get through all of them, but we'll certainly try and get through what we can. So we've got one here from Jean, which is, have you got any advice for getting books physically into outlets such as Waterstones? We've tried to go through their distributor before, but what's the best way of authors potentially getting their books out there onto the bookshelves in the stores?
So we have a guide to this actually. It's a long process and it's not easy. One of the main things to realize is that the profit for a micro publisher, which is what you are, on a print book sold through bookstores is very, very tight. It's very difficult for a small publisher to compete with corporate publishers who set the price of books in store. So it is the most challenging, the hardest work. There you have to give a very big discount and you have to be prepared to accept returns. So we would encourage people to do that as a third option. So in traditional publishing, we think of print as the first option and ebooks as kind of secondary, and audiobooks are often sold as a subsidiary right. In self-publishing, it's the opposite. We encourage people to do ebooks first, then audio, which is also a digital format, then do print on demand, and don't worry too much about bookstores until you are an experienced self-publisher and you're going to take that on as a whole job in and of itself. And it's complicated and way beyond, you know, the scope of this talk to give any meaningful advice on that.
Wonderful, thank you. Just having a look at some of the other questions in here. Getting reviews and being able to submit for literary prizes. I know one thing is that you can't use Amazon's free ISBNs. You have to buy the ones from Nielsen. If you've done that, what else do you need to start your own publishing company in order to be able to get the reviews and submit for prizes? So is there any difficulty with self-published authors being able to submit themselves for prizes or get reviews?
I don't know about that actually.
Okay, I can take that. There traditionally there was, but more and more prizes and more review outlets are now open to independent authors. So yes, you're absolutely right. Do get your own ISBNs. Amazon uses a different book publishing system. It's the ASIN. I see that somebody else asked, you know, are they the worst in the self-publishing field? No, not at all. Amazon sells a lot of books for a lot of indie authors, and you are best to go through the Amazon system as its own ecosystem. They operate their own way, if you like. Outside of that, then you as a publisher need to publish in other places as well. And you need your own ISBNs to be the publisher of record. And then there's nothing to stop you. There are certain prizes that are not open to independent authors, but we have, you know, we have been knocking on a lot of doors over the last 10 years, and more are opening. And there's certainly no shortage of prizes, and all the way up to the Pulitzer Prize, that are open to independent authors, and independent authors are winning them. And very often they're not even recognized. It's not even a big deal that they were independently published. People don't even know, because if a book is done well, then it's not obvious at all necessarily. And so, yeah, all you need is your ISBNs and off you go.
And someone's just asked me to put the link to the guides into the chat, which I've now done. There you go. Right. Okie doke. So more questions. Let's have a look. What about audiobooks? How do you look to get those produced? How do you produce those? Merla, did you? I think you said you produced audiobooks before.
Well, I'd love to know the answer to that, because okay, so besides self-publishing my book, my business plan, such as it was to self-publish 3. I think there's 3 additional short stories. So it would look like, when you look at it up on Amazon, it looks like it wasn't just one novel, that I'd actually done something else. And I paid a very nice actor to read the one of the short stories, and he did a cracking job. But obviously no one's going to buy on Audible, then they're not going to do it, you know, spend the full whack of whatever, you know. If you can get an Audible book that's going to go for 11 hours, you're not going to get, you know, you wouldn't pick a short story. So I mean, it's a great question. So that's all I did. But I mean, I'm just wondering, well, this is to all, are you suggesting that the writer does the reading as well?
Not unless, it goes back to the book design thing, not unless you are a skilled narrator. No, you're best giving that job to somebody else. So audiobooks are a bit more expensive to produce for that reason, but they also retail at a higher price. Up to recently, Amazon, ACX, Audible, they're all the same company, was your main, if not your only outlet for audiobooks. But there are some very good audiobook distributors in the marketplace now, and outside of the US and UK, Audible is far less powerful, and there are lots and lots of audiobooks. So the growth in independently published audiobooks over the last 5 years, and indeed traditionally published too, has been phenomenal. In fact, audiobooks saved digital audio saved the publishing industry. It's been an incredible success story. So yes, it's so much so, as I said, that we now, audiobooks are kind of the second format, and print has moved into third. So it is a matter, you get your narrator, and you can pay them, which we recommend, you know, beg, borrow or steal, invest in actually paying the narrator, and then you own the full package. Alternatively, you can do a royalty share, whereby when the book is sold, they get paid and you get paid, but it can tie you into complexities. And if you do it in that way on ACX, which is the Audible Amazon outlet, you're tied for 7 years, which is a long time. And there are different, we've seen all sorts of difficulties over the years with those contracts. So yes, you get the narration done, you get the files and you upload them. It's as easy as uploading an ebook. It really isn't complex once you've got a good product. Again, getting a good narrator, a bit like getting a good editor, you know, it's a bit of a marriage. So it's worth really shopping around and being very, very careful about it. But it's very doable now. libraries are taking audiobooks. There are lots and lots of good distributors out there.
Can I add something which is slightly tangential? This is a different way. I have got printout books and various things, but what I've done is podcasting. Now, I'm actually a professional broadcaster, so I can use my own voice. But I've turned these books into podcasts, and I'm working with a media agency and media people. So that's another way of promoting your books, because I think that because the books are printout or they can be Kindled, I've done a 6-part series recently. I'm in the middle of finishing it at the moment with a media agency that I work with anyway, but you could hire an individual PR, individual editor. Again, there are ways of podcasting. So that's another way of promoting your book, because then obviously people hear you. Or you can get yourself onto radio shows very easily, because all the regional radio shows are desperate for filling time. That if you send them your stuff, they will probably invite you onto a talk show or onto some sort of, if you're tweeting about yourself and you're Instagramming about your book, you then, or you're blogging or podcasting, then the listeners buy your book. So, there's always ways of promoting yourself or finding a way of getting your voice out there.
Brilliant. All right, I think we've got time just for one more question very, very quickly. This was a good one from Alan, which is the most important thing to love and enjoy your writing? Wealthiest self-published authors are very genre-driven. Romance and crime thrillers are the top genres, but following that, tropes can be a bit formulaic. Can self-publishing include both genre writing and more unique voices?
Absolutely. Genre, romance and thriller is also top of traditional publishing. That's just because there are more readers in those genres. It's nothing to do with whether you self-publish or you third-party publish. And there's room for all kinds of publishing in both sectors. It's just, you have to realize, if you do very esoteric books that have a very small audience, then you're not likely to sell as many books as if you do, spicy romance, which sells like hotcakes.
But also I've met, just been on holiday, and 2 people approached me, because I'm a ghostwriter as well, to ghostwrite their life stories. And I think ghostwriting life stories is very popular as a self-publishing genre, because people want to leave something legacy for the family, or they want to tell their story. I think it's a wonderful way of doing it. And yeah, I think with all writing, you've always got to be passionate. You've always got to believe in what you're doing. You've got to love it. You've got to eat it, breathe it, sleep it. You've got to want to write it. And that comes across in how you produce something. So, and you've got to believe in what you're doing. Always believe in what you're producing.
Wonderful. Well, I think that is a very, very good note to end on. I'd like to thank Merle, I'd like to thank Orna, I'd like to thank Bryn for all being with us this evening on a nice Friday afternoon. So we'll leave it there. Thank you very, very much. If you are not already a member of the Writers Guild, please do sign up now. It is absolutely worth it. We are not able to run these sorts of events, produce these sorts of guidelines, if we don't have our members with us.